Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Happy 420. This is episode 6, and you are joining Cannabis Equity Minutes with Cynthia Mompoint. Today has been a day of celebration for a lot of companies who are able to open up and celebrate the legal side of the cannabis industry. So hopefully you were able to partake in that. And hopefully you were able to support an equity business. In Massachusetts, we have 6 businesses that are equity businesses that you could have participated in, or if you don't have the access to those stores, you could always ask if they have any of the equity products in Massachusetts. So that's your way of being able to support and continue to champion on the business side of equity. And so today was also impactful in terms of things that happened around the country, news-wise, and I think it sent a message when it comes to accountability. Here it was, we received a verdict with the Derek Chauvin case, and the verdict is a guilty verdict. However, the work isn't done yet. We're waiting to see what happens. And why does this matter here in this space? Because accountability is important for whatever reason, in every aspect. And here in the cannabis space, we have so many of our people who are still being disproportionately targeted for their participation in using the plant. They're still being arrested. And then we have people who want to enter the space on the legal side, and they're being targeted for being equity program participants and voicing their need and the desire to enter into this space. And so this conversation around accountability, how are we holding the people who have come in to this industry and said, hey, not only are we going to legalize, but we want to ensure that we address those harmed the most by the war on drugs. We address social equity. That's the term that we're using, and we've talked about what that social equity term can mean or means to folks in other episodes. And what we see now happening is the fact that legalization, et cetera, moving forward. And what we need it to have happen is that we're holding folks accountable to what they're pushing forward. What do I mean? Here in Massachusetts, we've spent 3-4 years now working to legalize and then also implementing our equity program, which has been here since the inception of legalization. We've had our equity programs, and we've had people who come into this space and say that, they're going to be the champions for equity. They're going to be the ones pushing the needle forward, pushing the conversation forward around equity. And fast forward 2-3 years, the people who have been affected and have been identified as equity program participants, carrying that title, if you will, are saying, wait a minute, you said you've come into the space to champion our cause. You said that you've come to assist us, but we don't see that. In fact, what we see is you are assisting yourself. And it's actually quite creepy how this has happened, very systematically, in fact, for you to come in and whether you started out as an advocate or you served in a political role capacity officially, or you served in a professional role assisting businesses, deep pockets, multi-state operators be able to get their licenses here. Very creepy, because you said you came to support the cause around ending the drug war and around ending the harm around the drug war. And yet what we see happening, what we see you doing is serving the interests of the very people who sent you here, for the very people, whether it's SSDP, we talk about the Students for Sensible Drug Policy and the role that they played here in Massachusetts, whether it's our former commissioner who sat in the social justice seat, her connection to SSDP, her connection to Vicente Sederberg and Chris Crane and Forefront. These are companies that have a multi-state presence. And when we started legalization, the mantle was, oh, we need to legalize because it is an atrocity in terms of how these communities have been harmed and decimated by the war on drugs. So we have really when you think about it and you start to analyze, that's what was stated to get in the industry. And if you pay attention to markets that are opening up across the country, this is the same language. We need equity. We need social equity. People need the opportunity to enter into this space on the legal side, and they need to be, the harms need to be addressed, redressed, ameliorated for the injustices that happened under prohibition. And then you fast forward to what happens in these states that have gone legal, and you don't see it. The data doesn't lie. The data shows a story that says, wait a minute, these very people, if you go back and look, who were the people that were championing and stating the fact that they are the voice for equity. They are pushing legalization in the state, and they have catapulted themselves on a national front to be that voice. And then you look at, well, what did you actually accomplish? What were the outcomes? This is where it's time now. The community is stepping up and needs to step up and say, and hold these people accountable and say, wait a minute, you came in our state, you came and said that you were going to help us. You're being recognized around the country as saying that you've helped us, but the data doesn't show that. And when the people have cried out for that, the response has been a backlash. And so this is what they call wolves in sheep clothing, because that if you look at a wolf in sheep clothing, something's not quite right. So there is something a little creepy there, and you start to realize they came for the opportunity. And so you can talk the talk around equity, you can talk the rhetoric that is circulating on the need for social equity, empowering of these communities. You can talk that rhetoric, but when it comes time to taking action, what are you doing? Are you harping on the same status quo message that says, oh, we can't do anything because there's too many barriers for Black and brown people to enter into the industry? When in fact, the reason why you were put in the positions that you have been put in, whether you have been recognized as advocates in this space, you've been placed in seats of power to make decisions that are going to impact these programs as they roll out in the state, for you to sit there and say that you can't do anything, it's because that was never your intention. That was never your goal. And so this is where accountability comes to play, and our people need to start to look at these folks who are still circling the community, still leveraging the validity that we granted and bestowed upon them. The community bestowed their validity, whether it's the former justice chair and continuing to allow her to say that she's championed the cause for equity, when in fact it is a championing of a cause for legalization, which allowed the government to allowed for businesses to monetize and the government to benefit through taxation, but it allowed for big businesses to make money legally off this industry in a more expansive fashion. That's what the actual outcome and the actions show. However, when you look at what the rhetoric was, that's not what they said that they were going to do. No one said that. Why? Because they knew the people would not support that. The people would not sign on. The apprehension would continue. And so to lower our guard and increase the outcry from those who have been harmed, the flag was raised to say, hey, we want to help. And then once placed in these positions of power, they said there's nothing that we can do. And now it's time to account for where we are right now, 3 years later, account for what has happened since we've legalized. And the response is there's nothing that we can do, which in fact isn't true. And it's important that we no longer continue to bestow our stamp of approval on these people. They want to leave, let them leave. They want to leverage the role that they played in legalization, let them do so. And let it be known in Massachusetts, efforts for legalization were well underway long before any champion or anyone who wants to dub themselves champions for equity or social equity in cannabis came into our space, came into our state. And these are the same things that folks in other states need to be paying attention to. The voices, the rhetoric, ensuring that, make sure we don't lose you here, Instagram, ensuring that what they're saying they're going to do, they are doing it. And paying attention to the legislative bill, because they're paying attention to what we did in Massachusetts and realizing when you do legislate equity, you can hold folks accountable to it. And so if they want to push a bill and not legislate equity or create loopholes for it so that they can leave the folks who have been harmed out of the industry as the industry continues to grow and benefit financially exponentially, then they'll be able to do so. So make no mistake, if you're in New York, Georgia, Connecticut, Virginia, these states that are New Mexico, these states that are moving their legalization bills forward, that have just gone legal and now regulatory policies coming out, the same thing can happen at a policy level. And even if you've already gone legal, it is not too late. I think I saw there has been statements made that, well, we already went legal, and so that's it. History is not, that history has been written. Now it's time for accountability. And it's important that we step forward and hold our legislators, our political actors, our political people to the fire and say, hey, this is what you said you were going to do for us. We have these wolves who've come in and they are telling you that there isn't anything that can happen. And that's not the case. We want to see programs erected that provide the services that we need to ensure that we can open up our businesses, to ensure that we have the capital and access to resources so that we can erect our businesses, to ensure that we have the space, the networking opportunities, and so that we can be poised to be successful. That's all we're asking the people in power positions to do, to ensure that we're able to participate, that our presence is valid on the legal side, because it's sure our presence and participation when prohibition was in effect was utilized to make it legal. And so let's make no mistake, while it's being monetized and everyone's making money, let's make sure that the folks who that we used, Black and brown people, for those who may not, it may be lost on, that they are able to participate and benefit as well from this. And we have quite a bit going on. Again, focusing on Massachusetts, that's where we are. Massachusetts folks are constantly looking to Massachusetts, and we see the impact that the language and certain measures that we're doing here in Massachusetts that it has in other states, whether it's conversations around home grow, conversations around delivery. And some states have taken that and moved forward. Conversations around social equity itself. A lot of states are revisiting that and seeing what they can do. And I think the climate in our country and everything that's happened around the death of unarmed Black people at the hands of enforcement for infractions some of these for things that weren't even infraction, playing in a park, for simply going to the store and moving just in a regular way, police stops and so forth. So for all of these reasons, our culture is becoming more sensitive to this, to the topic of social equity and what we should be doing. And now we are just calling out here in our Cannabis Equity Minutes the need to say, hey, while you're paying attention to this, let's not just get hung up and feel good around the rhetoric. Let's hold people accountable for their actions and not accept the fact that nothing can be done. That is not true. We were shown that today, and we continue, as long as we continue to push and say, well, what are people saying? Here we have the PIES program. Who's doing the PIES program? Who has provided a system that allowed people who want to enter this industry but may not have the network, may not have the knowledge of all of the technical aspects of entering this, the assistance to pair them with companies that are doing this and benefiting demonstratively in this space, pair them with these companies, and then support them as they go through the processes, not only to open up, but also to be able to understand how to run their businesses in a way that if they so choose, they can expand, but most importantly, that their businesses are successful, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And then providing the seed capital so that they can tap into that. The folks may want to mention and highlight the fact that, yes, the banking bill on the federal level has gone through the House and it's gone there times, it's been approved, and it still needs to go through the Senate. And perhaps on the once bank when that banking bill is legalized and the president signs it into law, we will be able to see more access to funding for people who are in equity programs, for people who have been harmed by the war on drugs and harmed, also marginalized financially, and that's a significant barrier. There will be additional avenues to enter into this industry, but I think to say for folks to wait is an injustice itself and a slap in the face of equity. So yes, we're staying tuned to that, but however, we're not going to put all our eggs in that basket. And there are things that are happening right now today that we can do. Our regulators can do this. Our local municipality folks can do this. Our industry players, they themselves can do that. So, just stepping up to the plate in terms of being corporate, social, responsible actors in this industry. And so let's hold folks accountable. If you're tuning in from Massachusetts, we'll be commenting on things that are that the advisory board will be sharing with our Cannabis Control Commission this week, continuing to keep the pulse on what's happening there. So check back on Friday for our additional minutes updates and what else, and highlights on anything else, major developments that have happened in our state, locally, and across the nation. And that has been your evening. It's been a quick evening tonight on Cannabis Equity Minutes with Cynthia. I'm going to wrap up here. Here's a slide here. Good evening, everyone. Happy this stream here.